what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy it. I cannot escape. I really cannot escape the fantasy that I keep having in my head at that it's it's December 20th or December 21st. Christmas is in the air. Everybody's in a great mood. You're sitting there. You got your favorite drink in hand. You're warm inside. Maybe you got a dog or a cat curled up somewhere around you. Maybe the kids are still up playing. Maybe they're already asleep. Christmas lights from the tree floating, the edge of your vision. Presents wrapped under the tree. Maybe you got a snow village or a train. The point is, your mood's great. Only instead of watching the Gaylord Hotel's Music City Bowl, you're watching a playoff game. And maybe you're even getting ready to host a playoff game. It's a real possibility, y'all. Remember, you can be the 8th seed and host a playoff game. And so this is the call to LSU Nation, to everybody out there listening. Tell your friends, text them, spread the word here on Monday, July 22nd. The same way in which Off the Bench once manifested the Zion Williamson pick. Right? We use the secret, the power of manifestation to get the Pelicans the number 1 pick and defy the mathematical odds of the lottery. In that same way, we need to manifest an LSU home game because that is the only thing that makes this entire fantasy I just went through better is thinking about, let's say, all of those feelings on like a Friday night. And you watch a couple playoff games knowing the next day you're going to go out 4 days before Christmas and be tailgating, eating great food, having fun, getting ready for a night game in Death Valley that will probably feature like a Penn State or somebody like that. I mean, if that isn't football erotica, I don't know what is, because that warms my loins to an overwhelming degree. And that's on the table this upcoming football season, Jake.
It is funny. You want the bye because, that means you went and won the SEC and you get a top 4 seed. Sure, that's the smart play. But the play that you're talking about, having a home playoff game in Death Valley, I want all of that. Like, yeah. Not many times do you wish to not have a bye, but can you imagine the city of Baton Rouge on a playoff day, a home playoff day against an opponent that you would never play at home? You mentioned Penn State, and I was sitting there, I was thinking to myself, who would be the coolest opponent? Like, who would be the one that would bring the most juice to Baton Rouge? Because it wouldn't be, unless we got surprised, and I know the committee's like, oh, we don't look at conference affiliation. You do. So it probably wouldn't be another SEC team. Like, what would be the marquee matchup, like the most marquee that you could have? And I was like, oh, Notre Dame. Like, Notre Dame would be the matchup that would have the most intrigue because of Brian Kelly and his past history.
Ooh, hell yeah.
Notre Dame and LSU have played, a series before. I know the Independence Bowl, what was it, 96 or 97, whichever year that was, where LSU beat Notre Dame. That felt like kind of a jump start of the golden age of LSU football. You could have storylines galore. Like, there's so many different ones. Louisiana being a Catholics.
Like my grandpa always was like kind of cool with Notre Dame simply because they were Catholic. Although there was some game growing up where LSU and Notre Dame played, and I think Notre Dame didn't get a penalty the entire game. I can't. Maybe I'm remembering something wrong. It's a very vague childhood memory, and he was pissed.
Is there another team, T, that would move the needle more than Notre Dame and LSU home play? I mean, Ohio State maybe. There's some history there in the national championship game, but not like Notre Dame, huh?
Right, you ain't getting Ohio State at home. There's no way. Notre Dame's a realistic one both because like that's where everybody could end up ranked. No, I mean, again, like Penn State, Michigan, any of those teams could also fall into that same category. Only I think that they don't have the connections like you were just referencing, like Notre Dame.
For some reason, Penn State just, I cannot get fired up for Penn State. And I don't know if it's because it's the same thing that we always talk about with Miami, the same thing we talk about kind of with Nebraska on a different scale. It's like, man, you keep telling me that it's going to be different, and it's the exact same.
Yeah.
Like, so this is a big year, obviously, for Penn State because we've talked about it. Like, 12-team playoff is made for teams like Penn State. Well, okay, here it is, James. Let's see what you can do.
You know, FSU's in play. Maybe you play Florida State for a third year. Try to maybe finally get some revenge. We'll track down that kid. You can't spell LSU without the L, and hopefully get to square up with him one more time.
I need some ammo against EJ Manuel.
That's what I'm saying.
That's who I do the show with more times than not now. He quickly reminds me the last 2 years and what's happened. Like every time we bring up LSU, I think it's like in his contract that he has to tell me the score of those 2 games. Well, so I need this for me.
I was thinking about it at SEC Media Days, just walking around at one point. I don't remember why, but I was just thinking, like, what you're getting at, like, damn, you're never going to get those bragging rights back. Like, you're not going to play Florida State anytime soon, unless it would be in a playoff scenario. Like, you done screwed up. They got your ass for life. Wisconsin had us for years. Finally got him back last year, right? Florida State, I don't know when. UCLA, we got a chance, okay? It's time. It's time to kick Sissy Blue's ass and actually do it this time around.
Sissy Blue. I forgot all about Sissy Blue.
Yeah, dude.
Oh, man, that backfired on us.
It was tight until it wasn't.
Sissy Blue ran Sissy counter about 17 times with Zach Charbonnet, and we couldn't tackle Sissy Blue.
Yeah, and especially effective counterpunch from UCLA in that they didn't beat you with finesse. They like just pummeled you with their fists, and you took it when we're just bleeding and busted up the entire game. So, yeah, I mean, look, maybe a chance for Florida State revenge in a playoff scenario. The only thing is, I would say from where I sit, so the media ends up choosing LSU to finish 5th in the SEC. Now, I don't know if this is, excuse me. I don't know if this is just a sign that I have no great individual opinions and I'm just a sufferer of groupthink like everybody else is. But the top half of the media rankings break down pretty much exactly how I thought they would. Maybe the only thing that I waffled on is I still maybe have ended where I'd put Alabama over Texas, but I don't know. Then I thought Quinn Ewers and Sark looked really confident and kind of sold me once I saw those guys a bit. But media choosing Georgia first, then Texas, then Alabama, then Ole Miss. And that's very clearly the top 4 from the points, right? Like those are, and all those are pretty they're not too close with one another either. Alabama, Ole Miss is the smallest gap, but it's about 100 points. Then you go from Ole Miss to LSU at 5th, and it's 500 points. And again, this is pretty much exactly how we scored second tier. LSU, Mizzou, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and then A&M kind of sneaking up, trying to get into that second tier. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but pretty much the hive mind is all on the same page here. But the point is, I doubt, if we're talking about hosting playoff games, I don't know that I have LSU there, but I very realistically have them just like last year, where if you win that Florida State game, you're in. I have them knocking on the door of that 12 seed, maybe an 11 seed, and maybe hitting the road to one of these destinations come December 20th.
So a couple of different things. I think it was telling to see LSU 5th because it was a conversation. You mentioned the top 4, and I want to get to that as well. But it's like, okay, well, is it going to be Mizzou, Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma, A&M? Like, who's going to be in that next tier that we talked about all season long? Who's going to be the leader in that clubhouse? Well, it is LSU, and that's not just us locally. That's everybody at SEC Media Days telling you they feel like LSU. I had so many different people tell me that, man, people are sleeping on LSU. LSU's my sleeper. Greg McElroy, he every time I saw Greg, he was telling me about how he thinks LSU is very underrated. And
Greg
I'm trying
was
to think
so nice this trip too, for some reason.
He was in a very, very good mood, the best mood that I've ever seen him in. So,
Not
whatever
that he's not
it is,
normally,
Greg,
but he would just like kept coming out of his way to just like be like really kind all the time.
yeah. It was surprising. We'll say that. But he kept talking about LSU. In the Sirius XM room, like everybody that we had up, Dusty Dvorak, he's like, man, everybody's sleeping on LSU. Like, me, I'm like, I'm not trying to get in that conversation. I'm like, I'll let y'all say that.
Yeah.
I'll let y'all say that. I'm going to back up a little bit. Me and T-Bob, we got to stand. So we're going to have to wait to see the opener maybe before we give ourselves over to that. But I mean, it was a real conversation of, people thinking that LSU is incredibly talented. They think a lot of Blake Baker, obviously, and what he can do. And so, that was cool to kind of see that conversation and to see LSU kind of first in that next tier of teams. But I'll tell you this, me, at first I was reluctant to give myself over to Ole Miss. And you were talking about, I'm like, gosh, I just don't know. And the more that I saw who they added and who they retained, I'm like, okay, I think I'm with T on this one.
Yeah.
They're adding guys in spots they needed to add. And the biggest tell for me, and I told you this over the last week, the fact that we don't talk about Juice Wells being added to Ole Miss because they've added so many other pieces that Juice Wells is like the 7th best addition. Juice Wells led an all-season conversation last year for South Carolina, and that's like a 7th addition for them. And then, I'll be honest with you, I'd have them 3rd or maybe even 2nd in the preseason in the SEC. That's how impressed I was with the 3 players.
Who do you bump if you go 3rd?
If I go 3rd, Alabama, and if I go 2nd, it'd be Texas.
Okay.
I can see a situation where Ole Miss, even if they lose in Death Valley, they can still make that run to maybe the SEC championship game. Their players were highly impressive. I was sitting there with Neuheisel, and Doring was with me as well, and we kept saying, man, those 3 guys had a confidence about them. There was not a cockiness. There was a confidence about those 3 young men that sat down in front of us, and it felt different. I thought Jackson Dart had all the right answers. I thought Lane Kiffin was great in our one-on-one with him. I mean, obviously,
and
just
dealing
lost
with
his
some
father.
intense personal. For those that don't know, Monty Kiffin passing right before SEC Media Days, and Lane still showing up and doing his job.
And I mean, he was open about it and talked about. And I told you this. I think maybe on the air, off the air, I don't remember, but just was so open about his past failures and finally being in a spot where he feels like everything has kind of come together at the right time. The schedule, the toughest non-conference you have is at Wake Forest.
Yeah.
Now you got some tough conference games. You got Georgia, you got LSU, you got others, but they could with that schedule and conference play, they could lose a game and still be right there and still be firmly in the conversation. And it's just in this day and age with so much movement, and they have some movement, but also what they retained, to have Jackson Dart for a 3rd year. And I know you lose Judkins to Ohio State, but look, they got 3 running backs. They got Bentley, they got Parrish, they got Diggs. They got 3 guys that can carry the ball. And Judkins' sophomore year wasn't his freshman year either. I'm not trying to besmirch who he is as a player, but it wasn't as good once people kind of figured out his running style. If I'm an Ole Miss fan, I've never felt this before, and it's probably a pretty good feeling because I think that they have what it takes to make a college football playoff and then really have part of the conversation of who maybe wins the SEC.
Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.